Hope your video's off.
Oh.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is a regular scheduled city council workshop. Today's the 24th of March, 2025, and it's 5:26. First up on the agenda is an update from Penquist. Let me just go around the room and introduce everyone. We have Councilor Beck, Councilor Dean, Councilor Fish, myself, Councilor Fournier, Councilor Tremble, Councilor Mallard, and City Chair Pelletier. Also at the table are City Manager Deb Gorey, and we are joined by Jason Bird from Penquist Cap. Jason,
Yes.
on you.
Good evening, everyone. So a much beleaguered, much delayed project is essentially nearly complete and will have its first residents very soon. We have received 85 applications to date, and so our property manager, the Housing Foundation, is in the process of the rules are of reviewing for completeness, first in, first out. So it's, as you can imagine, it can be an exhaustive packet in order to be able to be ensuring compliance with our federal funding and our state funding, but they're in the process of doing that. Thankfully, the overwhelming majority of the individuals that have applied have a case manager helping them do it. Obviously, we simplify the application as much as possible, but a lot of it's out of our hands in terms of all the material. But we're in the process now of completing sort of touch-up stuff while we're waiting on, I think, one last piece for our certificate of occupancy. We've got a power supply change that has to happen in order to be able to fully electrify the rest of the building. And I think that's, if it's not done, if it wasn't done today, it should be done sometime this week, I would imagine, weather permitting. City staff have been great in terms of code enforcement, working with us on, we had a couple of things that architects and engineers didn't notice, but city staff did, and we had to move quickly to adapt, and they were thankfully able to come back in short order to make sure that it was done right. So we're thankful for that. From a timing perspective, I don't have an exact date yet, because I think of the first wave that have come in, they've been, I think, initially processed, and interview requests have been sent out to those individuals. I don't believe a date has been set, but the Housing Foundation has staff and they know that this project is a priority. So they're setting those up and teeing those up with, I think, some expedited urgency. But by and large, we are thankfully almost mission accomplished, with the caveat that it's going to take a little bit of time, of course, to make sure that we lease up to the individuals that we need to, and that are eligible for the services.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Fish.
If you had to give us a rough estimate on the time that it would be open, would you say 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I mean, if you.
I wouldn't say 3 weeks, but it depends on a variety of things. And in fact, I can look to Peter, he can give me a nod. Do the project-based voucher units, they need to be approved, the occupant needs to be approved by Maine Housing. That could take an extra couple of days. So some of those factors I don't know. We have a number of units that are essentially housing choice voucher units, which has probably a little bit of a less of a barrier to have to, boxes to check essentially. I would think we're within a few weeks at most at this point, maybe 2 is my guess.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Beck.
I would just make a comment that appreciated being able to see the units at the ribbon cutting, and they're beautiful. And I'm excited for the future residents to see their new home.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Tremble.
Yeah, this is great. It's been, I know it's been a struggle to get to this point, but it's, everybody persevered and we got here. My question is not so much about Teresa's place, but just curious while we got you, what's the status of the Milford Street project?
Sorry, didn't I?
Yeah, that's great.
You sent them up?
We need,
Not.
we have, we are after a variety of curveballs, we're ready to go. We're basically waiting on Maine Housing to go through their loan approval process. Our hope, our sincere hope is that we can get an early start. We don't know, or Maine Housing right now can't tell us, hey, we can get you your approval by 60, 90, even 120 or 160 days. They can't give us a date right now. We're saying to them, we have funding available that isn't your money. Give us an ability to get an early start, get the contractor going as soon as they're able, which can be tomorrow. That money is gonna take several months, probably 6 or 7 months easily to spend down. That would give Maine Housing the remainder, or give them a little bit of breathing room, because they've got a very big pile of other projects in front of them. So that's what we're waiting to see. They have been reticent to do that for any developer in the past. Our hope is, based on our track record, based on the sort of fiscal responsibility that that comes with Penquis's reputation, that we're well managed and run. We should have some ability to convince them that we're adults and we can handle that risk and be able to move forward. So that's the ball's sort of in their court, we're ready to go whenever we get that nod.
Councilor Pelletier?
Thank you. And this may be more of a question for the city manager. How many folks have we identified who were previously at Camp Hope who are waiting to get into Teresa's place and have applied? I mean, can you just give us a rough number?
Yes, so of the ones that I am aware of through the direct care workers, there were 10 individuals who had been notified that they were awaiting an appointment. So I don't have a complete total application submitted, but I know 10 had been contacted to get the interview set up that Jason referred to.
And so where are those folks in the interim?
So the folks in the interim, they are in a variety of spaces. We were successful in getting several folks into shelter. We also had some folks who found families or friends as to where they're staying in the interim. And we had a couple of folks who had connected with our warming shelters. So we have kind of a whole variety of folks. I'm not going to fib. We have a handful of people who none of those options are acceptable, and they are outside somewhere else.
So we will anxiously be awaiting the official opening date, as I'm sure they will as well.
Yes.
So when do you expect the CO?
This week,
This week?
this week.
Good.
The city code office staff have been making themselves available, so that I don't expect that to be a heavy turnaround. It's a matter of getting other pieces buttoned up and allowing them for us to then say, come back one last time.
City manager?
So I have questions that you
Yes.
mentioned. So the C of O that the city issues is one stop. Is Misha on board? So Maine State Housing has to come in and also do a final inspection of the project. And are we still on track to get them there this week then?
Yes, yep, that is still the plan. So they have to do
Because they have to do the two
technically
inspections.
two different inspections.
Correct.
So one for the project-based vouchers
Correct.
and then one for the building itself because they funded the project.
And I think an important factor too, when Jason referred to, and they were talking about, the additional time it may take for an individual who accesses shelter here, who may qualify for a project-based voucher. So we often talk about lots of types of housing vouchers. Project-based vouchers, these are housing assistants who are assigned to the project. So there will always be 18 vouchers assigned by the state of Maine to this project. So if a person who is assigned one of those vouchers gets into another housing situation, that voucher doesn't follow them, it remains with the property so that the next person can come in and be assisted. But the balance of the 41 units are not tied to vouchers. So while there may be a delay in getting some in who may be looking to access those 18 vouchers, there won't be that kind of delay for the other 23 units. Which actually probably works out a little bit because you clearly don't want to be trying to move in and orient 41 households all at the same time.
Mhm.
So when you hear that the voucher piece may take a little bit longer, somebody may be coming in with a voucher already. But what we also know is it's an opportunity to have a sliding scale rental in this facility. So we know we have a number of individuals in both shelters that have, let's say, a social security disability payment for a monthly income. That income isn't sufficient to allow them to perhaps access a different type of housing, but this is likely a good project where they can come in, commit 30, 40, 50% of their income to their housing costs. And it does a couple of things. It allows them into permanent housing, but it also frees up space in the limited number of shelter beds we have. The other thing, I would say is that while this isn't a traditional housing first project, although we all anticipated that's what it was going to be, but push comes to shove, when the rulemaking happened, the way the rules were written and the way the federal money came for the construction, it didn't qualify. So, Maine Housing, did free up some of the money in the project to pay for CHCS to have a staff person on site Monday through Friday, I think 40 hours a week, or whatever the schedule may be, but
To
40
get
hours a
them, to
week.
get them started, they have
To get them
other,
started.
they have other DHHS funding
Correct.
that they anticipate billing,
Correct.
depending on the severity of the need of the individual.
Correct.
If they choose to participate
Correct.
in those additional services, they can do that.
Yeah, so there will be the ability to access services on site. But it will not be staffed 24/7 if that's what anybody was thinking. But it,
Not yet, not to
Not
cut
yet.
you off, but our goal is to still get back to that original dream, because we know that that need is considerable, and that's our hope. So we're working on, at least for now, getting it occupied, getting it stable, and then we'll continue the conversation around eligibility and long-term services.
I think I'd be really interested in, because I think it was a week and a half or so ago that I heard that they were setting up interviews, so I'd like to think that there were interviews already set up, so if you
Good.
give us an update on that, that would be great,
I'll keep
Jason.
it posted.
Okay.
Anything else? Thanks, Jason.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah, not bad for some.
Not bad. Yeah. Might be able to get home before everything freezes up.
All right, next up, recap of National League of Cities.
Well, it's unfortunate that we have our council chair who's ill, but she's here with us, and Councillor Hawes also indicated she was ill, so she isn't able to be here, but Councillor Beck forwarded along his lengthy notes, and I figured I'd just kind of do a quick highlight and look to them, both of those that
Before we
are
get
here.
started, just want to say that Councilor Leonard
Yes.
just joined us, he excused himself because of the Pike Woods update. Thank you.
Thank you. Three councilors and I traveled to Washington DC for the National League of Cities. We had Council Chair Pelletier, Councilor Beck, and Councilor Hawes. We spent a lot of time with our other main community friends from Brewer, Hamden, Bath, South Portland, and Portland. I think I got everybody.
Yeah.
As well as MMA staff and board members, and those board members represent other communities. So those communities included Bradley and Monmouth. So I just went through and kind of summarized all of the topics that we could have gone to hear about. They included maintaining momentum in economic and workforce development, a housing supply accelerator, safe communities, unlocking federal fundings, utilizing clean energy finance programs, streamlining federal partnership, new rules for PFAS, lead, and copper, building tech-ready connected communities, aviation advisory forum, a couple of highlights. I know both Council Chair Pelletier and Councilor Beck are very good about capturing pieces of information. Some of the topics that I saw come in was that the EDA has been reauthorized for the first time in 20 years. So that was kind of a nice thing. There was a session on value of arts and culture for stronger cross-sector collaboration and problem solving, workforce development, opportunity priorities and finding solutions, economic mobility, rapid grant program, and possible SNAP reductions. So I think I took those from all of the things that Council Chair Pelletier shared, and I know Councilor Baca, you had quite a lengthy lesson as well.
Oh, yeah, and I don't expect us to go through it all. And I wanna make sure I share with everybody, but you know, the one things I wanna say is, as you're going through it, and looking at it, you're gonna say, wow, we're already doing that. Wow, we're already doing that. Like, oh, so much of it, we're already doing. And one of my biggest takeaways from it was called America's Housing Comeback, is how far ahead we are on paper versus other communities where they're just now talking about zoning, just now talking about density, just now getting into those conversations where, you know, you combine what we heard from this track and our implementation plan that we got from the housing study, and it really just comes down to money. I mean, it really does come down to money and how do we get more funding? Because the planning here in forming more, you know, private-public partnerships, it was really nice to hear it, you know, especially, you know, as a new counselor where I'm not wasn't privy to a lot of this information as a citizen. It was able to make more sense. So I was glad I was able to attend that track.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I would like to add as well. I agree with Counselor Beck. You know, it's my third year in a row attending this conference, and it's always a really good indication that Bangor's on the right track and in many cases ahead of the game in how our staff and how our council is thinking about investing in and sort of reinventing parts of our city. There were a few grants that I had tagged that might be of interest for us to look into. I haven't, sorry about being down with pneumonia. It's sort of put a hold on me getting these notes over to Debbie, but a couple of things. There's a new program that the National League of Cities is partnering with an organization on to do wastewater monitoring to track opioid use in cities, to be able to see if the problem is increasing or decreasing over time. I thought that might be an interesting thing since we're already tracking all kinds of stuff in wastewater, to see if that's something that the city of Bangor might be interested in. There are a number of arts and cultural grants that are available to support the social and physical determinants of health and social cohesion. There's an economic mobility rapid grant program, and a couple of additional grants in the Neighborhood Home Investment Act. There's also something called Main Street USA that does placemaking grants that I wanted to share with the DBP, because I know they're all about placemaking in downtown Bangor. And then there was a lot of conversation about sort of the uncertainty in federal funding and which grants are expected to be available versus would actually be available. And so what many cities are doing is they're putting together what they call shovel-ready projects, which is essentially, we've put the plan for the project in place, we have the council approval, we've made the connections we need to make with contractors, and as soon as grant money is ready, we're going to apply and just get started on things. So it might be a good opportunity for us if there are projects that we want to do in the next 2 or 3 years to get those shovel ready, so that when grant funds are re-available or newly available, that we can just go ahead and apply. So as always, I think NLC is a good use of time, especially for newer counselors, to be able to go and hear what's happening across the country. Because one of the things you realize is that Bangor is both very unique and not at all unique in the problems and challenges that we're facing as a city.
Councilor Beck.
Just on the tech connected cities, just want to add an action item I did bring up, and I don't know if Bangor has an AI policy.
It's something that the assistant city manager and I were just talking about last Friday.
Yeah, because that's one of the things they
Yeah.
recommended, definitely make it a priority to get one. But also I just had to add this in the note, they had the acting FCC director there, who wanted us all to know that they are hard at work at the Calm Act to make sure that commercials on television are not louder than the program. So, you know, rest assured, they're hard at work on that.
And I would share that we did, so it was I'm assuming that what it looked like this year is similar to what it looks like whenever there's a change in administration. Because a lot of federal agency officials attend and try to provide as much context and background as they can. But with a new administration being seated in January 20th, their direction still isn't wholly clear. But I think they were all very open.
Yep.
With what they did know. I always, anyway, walked away from, the federal government does recognize that municipalities are their partners, that we are the ones that are actually getting the work done that's closest to the residents.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of reiterated because we also obviously got to meet as Mainers with, both Senator King, Senator Collin, and Representative Golden. All were very, gracious, really understood kind of what the challenges that were being faced in Maine, had a high level of awareness. We talked with them. The federal issues papers developed sort of as a statewide area of priority or concern, talking about, protecting the partnerships that we have, specifically related to specific types of funding, whether it's housing vouchers, LIHEAP, WIC, CDBG. That being able to continue to have access to sort of those funds is important, but we recognize there may be shifts at the federal level, and asking that if those shifts are coming, as much notice that we can have, is there a way to kind of do a soft landing so that we can determine as a community if this is something we want to continue or not continue, instead of it being very abrupt. We talked about the need to protect municipal tax exempt financing options. Municipalities can issue bonds on a tax exempt basis, which means our residents pay a lower interest rate to borrow money than perhaps a commercial business. So there's often talk about that. If that were to go away, what that means is our municipal projects would cost our residents more in interest. So they were very supportive of that. We also kind of talked quite a bit about what the impact is in Maine being a border state, with tariffs and the implications. I can certainly understand why, I'm not trying to pick on any one state, but perhaps Indiana, what happens with tariffs in Canada aren't as directly related as what it is in Maine. We talked a lot about how there are contracts. So the one example we used for a good example from Bangor is, as we've talked about, all of our aviation fuel comes from Irving. Irving is a Canadian company. Our largest customer for aviation fuel is the Department of Defense. And our Department of Defense contract is a fixed rate contract. So if our cost goes up due to tariffs, we can't recoup that we can recoup that from some of our customers, but we can't recoup it from our largest customer, which is the Department of Defense. So that was really good information for them to have to go, oh yeah, there are additional implications for that. Our estimate right now is it would be about a $200,000 loss in revenue a month to the airport. The good news is that contract, that fixed rate contract, is through September. And there continues to be discussion, so hopefully the impacts are mitigated. We also talked about the need to improve communication avenues. It can be really difficult to get in touch with federal agencies and get clear direction as to what we need to do to accomplish things. Again, we're having staff changes, so hopefully that smooths out over time. Talking about supporting treatment in place in first responder health. Right now, for example, if our EMS responds and treats somebody and doesn't transport them, they can't bill for that service, even though they've provided a medical service in the street. So looking for options like that. And there is also a OSHA fire brigade rule. There are outdated OSHA regulations related to fire services, and it's about bringing everything up into compliance all at once. None of us disagree that it's important to comply and ensure the safety of our employees. But this in essence would basically put out of business any volunteer or part-time on-call fire services. And in the state of Maine, that's a pretty substantial amount of the coverage that gets seen. So I thought all three, I mean, the conversations were just fascinating when Senator King is faced with having to vote on a continuing resolution that he doesn't really support, but is it better to pass the continuing resolution or to result in a government shutdown? And when he turned and looked at everybody in the room and said, what would you do? I think everybody went, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah,
And Senator Collins was very open that she had, for example, she'd already had meetings with the president and the board and the CEO of Irving, recognizing the impact that heating oil has in our state, jet fuel has on our state, and how Irving, can help facilitate and mitigate some of those impacts. So it was a really good,
Yeah.
I thought, discussion.
Questions? Comments? Seeing none? Legislative updates.
Yeah, you're just zooming through this. I thought this would be long. All right, so I did update the packet for the legislative hearings. For the legislative items under this evening. I did also include upcoming hearings for the next 2 weeks period. Just to kind of set the stage a little bit. Obviously, last week, the state of Maine, the legislature passed the budget. The governor has signed the budget, and then the legislature was, I'm gonna use the right term, basically ceases at that point. So she has called everybody back to session so that they continue to work on the additional bills. What this does mean, however, is that there will be no state government shutdown. So the budget was passed, will allow for the continuation of state operations from July 1. What it also did, though, is it wrapped in portions of the supplemental budget. I think one of the biggest concerns that I've seen and heard about is the lack of funding for main care. So there is a reduction in payments to all main care providers from now until July 1st, until that new budget kicks in. But now the legislature will continue to look at potential additional law changes that may or may not have a budgetary impact, and that would have to go through a whole process as well. We've also learned that the practice that had been in place to allow at least 2 weeks notice prior to a public hearing being scheduled has been paused. So it's likely that things will be coming fast and furious again. Just as a reminder, the city is a member of the Legislative Policy Committee of the Maine Municipal Association, as well as the Maine Service Solar Coalition and the Mayor's Coalition. And all of these associations codify positions on behalf of the entire membership from time to time. So in reviewing the calendar for the next 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and based on feedback from a couple of counselors, I just wanted to put in front of you a couple of acts that we had identified initially. LD 297 is an act regarding the management of oversized bulky waste from wastewater treatment plants. No hearing date has been set yet. So for those of you that were here when we talked about solid waste and landfill and the disposal of biosolids in the past, you may remember that there was a change in state law that allowed for the continued use of so-called bulky waste in state-owned landfills. And the bulky waste is necessary in order to be able to accept biosolids from municipal wastewater plants. Because if you think about it, if you think about how you stack a landfill, if you all have what I'm going to call squishy material, it won't stay put. So you need to put bulky material into it to make the site stable. That current bill expires at the end of June. We still have no solution in place for the disposal of biosolids. So this bill would extend that allowance for another 2-year period, I think until 2027. And I'm looking at Amanda. 3, okay, 2028. So we do think that we should continue to support that and know that we continue to participate at the state and federal level to find a better way to address the disposal of biosolids. So I just wanted to see if everybody's
Shaking
still
their heads,
supportive of
yes.
that.
Counselor Trumbull?
Yes, and do we know who put that in? I mean, the chairs of that committee have a lot of influence on where that went last time. Do we, are the chairs on board with that, you know?
As far as I know, the chairs are, this was Brigio.
It was Bill
And,
Bridges.
Sobolewski.
Yeah, he probably is.
Sobolewski is the sponsor of the
Correct.
original bill that this one is extending.
And Sobolewski is a co-sponsor of this bill.
You watch Bridgio, you know what his former profession was.
He was a city
I
manager.
know.
You leave him alone. We can trust Bill Bridges.
I think we're in agreement. Yeah, Counselor Leonard?
Does anyone else have anything on LD 297? Because I have a more general comment about this process. Anyone? Okay, so the entire list of bills that you forwarded to us, it was a lot.
Yes.
Didn't read through all of them. I will bow my head to anyone who did on council, and this kind of showed me that that right now we need to actually be serious about forming a legislative committee, actually having a chair, actually getting counselors involved, making sure that we schedule that with local representatives and our senator and potentially even Penobscot County commissioners if anyone wants to come there. But this is receiving all this information just over the weekend and knowing that they're going to be hearing these bills in a very, very timely fashion. It's we need to be much more methodical and prepared for this and actually have scheduled legislative discussions. And I think we need to start that process now in order to get in time to actually have a more productive legislative session next year when we're talking about the next state budget coming up. Because right now, I'm not prepared to actually know for sure every single bill that has been listed here that would actually be beneficial to Bangor or ones that are going to be harmful to Bangor, and we should be informed on that. And I don't think we're going to be able to do a good job on this unless we actually form a committee that has proper guidance. And it doesn't need to meet regularly. It can be an irregular committee, just like personnel committee. I'm completely fine with that because it would be a waste of time otherwise. So right now, I implore us all to do your research on these bills. Anyone that stands out to you, let's try and get a consensus and try to go as is. But I'd like to see on the future a workshop on how we can start the process for forming another forming another committee that is solely focused on the legislature, because we don't know if the federal government's gonna be reliable or not, and we're gonna have to lobby the state to receive some attention, because right now we're receiving extremely little, especially when you compare CD1 to CD2 in general. That's all I really have to say on that. I mean, I'll add comments to anything that I have notes for, but that is definitely something we need to set up ASAP.
Questions, comments, Counselor Beck?
I'll echo those comments, because even legislators struggle with the vast number of bills that are out there, and, some kind of divide and conquer on this stuff, because, these are so many of Bangor's interests are in some of these bills that I don't want us to miss opportunities. So there's a way for us to, get more involved in the legislative process and really make sure that we're lobbying and advocating for, our collective position for the city would be great.
Any other comments?
Just a general comment along that line, would be helpful to me if we could get the LPC from municipal, do they have a sheet of bills they've taken positions on? Or
No.
Oh, how do they
No.
do? Is it an ad hoc thing?
So they meet periodically, and I have been connected with Council Chair Pelletier. I do have another couple of councilors who are interested in serving on that too. So what I find is it's been a 6-hour meeting.
Right,
And at the end of the meeting, I'm not seeing a recap
Oh,
of the
okay.
positions.
Oh, okay.
So that was Thursday and I went, it would be nice to know where everything
right,
stood.
yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's my impression that we were kind of relying on MMA for a lot of that info, as well as department heads, because they're connected to the various. What.
The professional
DLBs that are coming
associations,
up,
correct,
and they kind of bring it
Yep.
forward to you. and-
which is how I
Which is
got to
why.
297.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
but I hear your point.
And I'll say, I'm guilty of this too. I brought 487 and so many rail bills forward to get the council's opinion and the green light for that to go forward, because that's just how we operated, but
right.
we do need to change. Like, we have to be much more methodical about this.
It'll be 11:44.
So before we move on, sorry,
Didn't see a hand, go ahead.
that's okay. Some municipalities actually hire a lobbyist who can work for their interest in Augusta. And, if we're not getting the return on investment that we need from LPC or from the Mayor's Coalition or for whatever else, maybe it's worthwhile to take the dues money that we're paying those organizations and give it to somebody who can represent us as more of a full-time role. I'm not saying we're not getting our money's worth, but as the third biggest municipality in the state of Maine, it would be good to have a voice of someone who can track this professionally, give us timely updates, because it feels like if everyone's in charge of it, then no one's in charge of it. And it's hard for all of our department heads to funnel everything to us in a timely manner, especially if now the public hearing notice has been reduced from 2 weeks. To Councillor Leonard's point, it doesn't give us a lot of time to review, think about it, thoughtfully debate it, and then respond to it. So, perhaps something we should consider as we're looking at the budget for next year is whether it makes sense to use some money to get a lobbyist who can work for us.
All right, LD 11:44.
This was a request, from Councilor Mallor. This would reinstate the property tax stabilization program. Many of you may recall that, it was undone last year and last session. And what this did was a program that in essence froze the taxable value of a property owner, based on the number of years that it was their homestead and their age. And what happened is every municipality had to create a way to track this in an application process. And we submitted it to the state, and lo and behold, it cost more than the state had budgeted. So we said you either have to, and we also required every 480 some odd municipalities to do this. And said, why aren't you doing this at the state level? So, the legislature revoked it. And now, it is coming back, and I understand the desire and the need to create property tax stabilization for any number of constituents. We do have a concern about the administrative cost and as to whether or not the lost revenue, if you will be returned to the municipality. So anytime you exempt value from taxation, this is a smaller population. But if you don't get the money back from the state, you still have to raise the taxes for it. I think one of the other concerns in this original bill too was it did not take into account income. So you could, in essence, game the system and say, I'm living in a 2,000, my property taxes are $2,000, and now that I've been established, I can move to something vastly different. So, but I'm happy to have whatever the council would like to take for a position or a discussion on that. This bill would stabilize the property tax bill to an individual for up to $900,000 of assessed value for the eligible homestead. And it is for It would, the municipality would receive 100% back. And this would be for permanent residents 65 years of age or older, beginning April 1 of 2026.
If the state's gonna.
If the state's gonna fund it
reimburse
100%.
That's fine, but I don't think that will happen. Councilor Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a reason to oppose, I agree.
Yep.
It's just, when they passed the last legislation, it's just, you knew it wasn't sustainable, and neither would this be. I wouldn't oppose this, but I think if they had something which would, maybe you could increase the homestead exemption for seniors, and that way it wouldn't impact, people who have higher properties that still have to pay, but everybody would get that basic homestead exemption, maybe up to 100,000 or something.
And there were lots of bills like
Yeah,
that.
Isn't 900,000 kind of high? I would think if the purpose was to try to help people that are economically disadvantaged, it's probably unlikely someone is gonna be economically disadvantaged and, they could have a hardship, but I'm just thinking if we want to leverage the opportunity for more people in an economically disadvantaged price income, if we went, if they had it less, I guess we don't really have an opportunity to change it, but it seems like it could serve more people.
Right.
Give more people the advantage.
And if I look at the sponsors of the bill, I can see that in Cumberland, home prices are relatively high.
That's true.
So, it could be a property that they bought 30 years ago that's now valued significantly higher. It also has a co-sponsor from Aroostook. So if you think about, I can
Was
think
that
about
Stewart?
coastal, it was.
We could easily sponsor the original bill.
Yeah.
last time.
So I can see farmland properties, coastal properties that have been in families for a long time being really highly taxed. So, I mean, there's so many nuances as to
Yeah.
where that number got picked.
Councilor Beck.
If we testify on this, is there a way we can estimate what the impact will be in the testimony and say, hey, if you do this and you don't fund it, this is the impact to Bangor's bottom line? Or some kind of estimate,
I
just to
think,
show how it would affect us.
I think we could do that based on the 1 year that the program was in operation. Yeah. Sounds like people are okay with supporting that.
The state's gonna fund it.
Actually, I got one other thing.
Councilor Trumbull.
Actually, now that I think about it, I do have a problem supporting it, because what happened, it's not sustainable, and what happened last time, people signed up, so they got frozen.
Correct.
And then when they went away, they got hit really hard because they had to make up for the time they were in the
Right.
program. And then, so I'm actually would oppose it, because I think it's not gonna last, and when it goes away, the elderly people are gonna get really hit hard on, to make up for the time they were in the program. So. It happened, 2 or 3 years ago when
It
it
did.
went away, yeah.
It happened, but nobody saw it.
No, I
It
mean,
wasn't
that's,
recognized until after the.
right, that's, people, when they went away, they had to make up the valuation for when they were in the program.
Councilor Beck.
I would say maybe it goes back to the larger discussion of maybe seeing
Right.
some more of these programs done through income tax, through credits and things. Rather than us having to,
Right.
manage all these mini programs.
So there is an existing mechanism in place that the state could change. And they could change the main property tax fairness credit program. And they could address and target tax relief in any way they wanted. And they actually have the data that indicates whether or not this person is their age. They have information related to income, and they have information related to, because you do have to include your physical address, they have all of that information available to them. So, I mean, we could also suggest alternatives like, we support tax relief. It has to be sustainable. We're concerned about if it doesn't, and perhaps look at using your main property tax fairness credit to really target tax relief where you want to.
Councilor Dean.
My question, back to what Counselor Tremble said, what do you mean that they had to then?
Well, people,
It
if you
wasn't
go to
really
the program
forgiven?
4 years, say whenever the program was 4 years ago, right?
Mhm.
And your valuation froze at 300,000. So for the next 3 years, or whatever years, you paid tax on 300,000. But in that time, your valuation had gone up to 400,000. So when the program goes away, all of a sudden your taxes are going up to that $400,000 range, instead of going from 300 to 330 to 360 to 400. All of a sudden, you're hit with a huge tax
Big
bill
increase.
next year.
Okay.
Counselor Beck,
I was just gonna say, I think we all agree, we wanna see people get
Right.
help. I mean, tax relief is number one, cause the other piece of this too is inequity between communities, where we've got a aging population who would be more likely to use this program versus another community who not so much. So again, it makes more sense of trying to figure out a way, how can we manage it through the state level?
Okay. I feel we have sort of testimony suggesting alternatives or
Yeah.
or additional considerations. Okay. Council Mallard, that was your item. Did you want to add anything? Oh, you're still muted. I think you're working on it.
you need to unmute.
He's working at it.
I think you can.
Oh, can I unmute? Can I go into participants?
And then hit the square. Make it big,
Thank you.
and then hit this,
Okay, I can unmute. Hang on, I think I can get you.
ask to unmute, so that way you can click a button. Oh.
Just wow, very good.
We did it, we did it.
Nice.
No, I don't have any issues with just expressing the fact that we need to do assistance to the senior citizens, especially where we have a larger population of them. No, I think anything we can do to help is good.
All right.
Great.
The next one was Counselor Beck. An act to expedite the process involving municipalities that illegally move a person to avoid responsibility for general assistance support. Currently under state statute, if you have an individual in your community and you assist them in getting housing in another community, you are the community of responsibility. And you are required to pay for that person for a particular point in time. And what they're trying to do is to increase and create some teeth, if you will, into the current law to ensure that people aren't doing that. I can say that we don't hear about it much in our community. It's not kind of what we see often, but I'm sure others are. And anything we can do to ensure that general assistance is deployed equally across the state is important.
Yeah, and the thing for me, what my push for this bill is that, I guess we're trying to get, the 90% reimbursement, trying to get, these things administered at the state level, but if those things don't work out, this bill also adds a rebuttable presumption. Instead of us having to prove you moved that person to avoid this, it assumes you did. You've got to now prove that you didn't do it. And I think it takes a lot of burden off of us, so we try to make these claims, and it also reduces the period from 30 days to 15 days to get reimbursed. So I think this would be a benefit to our community as a community that ends up being a receiver from quite a few times from other communities who, shirk their responsibility to their own residents. So if you don't have the infrastructure to help your residents, fine, but if you're gonna use ours, pay for it. That's your responsibility. Those are your residents, and it's only fair.
Comments? I think we're all in agreement.
Aaron?
No, I'm sorry, Counselor Fish.
With this, this is a good idea also, because I think in other communities, I've heard that some of the applicants fill out the application throughout their municipality and they become unqualified for assistance. But then when they go to another community,
Right.
they qualify. So this might give them a little more teeth.
Yep.
7:48.
So this came up Friday, so this was under my manager updates, just to let you know. The state of Maine offers housing assistance through the Bridging Rental Assistance Program, referred to as BRAP. In March of 2024, the state instituted a partial wait list for those that fell under the third priority. And the third priority identified in the BRAP program is literal homelessness. This decision was made on demand and capacity at the time. From that time until present, the program has only been awarding new rental assistance resources to individuals coming from priority 1, which are psychiatric hospitalization, and priority 2, incarceration. They continue to see an unprecedented need for assistance. So effective today, the state has paused all awards of any sort of BRAP assistance to any new applications. So this bill, we were just like, oh, cool, it's like 660,000 extras, it should be fine. And then we found out Friday afternoon, it's needed more than ever to actually allow the program to continue to operate at some level, because right now it will not take any new applications for BRAP assistance. So it is, if you think about, and I'm going to use incarceration because we have Penobscot County Jail here. If you come out of incarceration and you don't have access to a living space, an existing living space, this was the mechanism by which you could get housing assistance for a period of time to get yourself settled, get back into a community, and to begin to rebuild your life. So without that housing assistance, are we now adding individuals to the unhoused population in our state? Same thing with coming out of a psychiatric hospital, depending on the length of stay. You may not have a place to go back to. And depending on your medical needs, you may need some stability. And not having that resource available, I think, is really going to create an increase in homelessness. So I did put some draft testimony in there for you all to review and consider as well. And it does try to emphasize that this program diverts individuals from homelessness, as well as creates movement in the homelessness continuum. So.
Good.
All right. 1078. I did send out some draft testimony, and I knew there would be different feelings on this particular topic. This is an act to support Maine's public health objectives by increasing access to hypodermic apparatus exchange programs. In essence, what it would allow is, these are commonly referred to as syringe service providers, or SSPs. It would allow an SSP that has a license to use that license and move to locations throughout the county without having to go through the application process. So I think as a city, we've been very supportive of harm reduction, but we also know that it needs really good oversight and planning and input from the municipalities, and that is something that isn't currently there.
Councilor Trumbull?
That's all I would say. I would say if we testify that there should be some type of approval by the host community.
Okay.
Whatever it is. I mean, I think too often we're not only not approval, but not even taking our comments into consideration when we try to direct them in a certain area.
Councilor Wendy?
Well, one of the issues I have with this is, I mean, it's an HIV outbreak that we're talking about here in this area. And the first line of defense is making sure that vulnerable communities have the best defenses possible if they are in vulnerable positions where they are more prone to contracting preventable diseases. And so my fear is not giving enough leeway to these providers to lay down the defenses against these diseases can cause this outbreak to explode. And I know it seems like it's far away from us, because most likely the majority of individuals that have contracted HIV in Bangor have most likely been on the lower end of the poverty spectrum. But that diseases don't care if you're rich or you're poor. And so we might not think that we are going to be directly contaminated, but through indirect contact, that can occur. And my fear is that if we put too many hoops for these organizations to go through, it's going to slow down their process of actually going out into the field and defending Bangor citizens from this HIV outbreak from blowing up further. So I do agree that communication coordination needs to happen. I think I think the language here is a bit too strong in almost to demonizing SSPs in a way, and I don't really like
Yeah,
that
that's- yeah.
particular part of the language.
And I will share that our own personal experience, so for example, we had an SSP, we had a need for an additional SSP from a mobile perspective. And CDC was able to turn that around in 10 days. And they did it by contacting us and asking, this is what we'd like to do, is this appropriate? And we said, by all means. And we had the meeting on November 4th, and on November 14th, we received notification that CDC had approved and expanded that SSP license. Because I agree with Counselor Leonard that the ability to be nimble, to respond to a need is appropriate. But to Counselor Trumbull's point, having the input from the municipality is really important.
Councilor Pelletier?
Thank you. I would say, my concern about this is our previous experience, which is an SSP applying to be able to use locations in Bangor that the municipality wasn't consulted on. 2 of them were municipal property that the city council had expressly said we don't want an SSP here. And 1, they had applied for a permit on essentially it was private property owned by the University of Maine, Augusta, without speaking with them. So I do think that a review of locations is a responsible and reasonable ask if SSPs want to expand their services. I don't think having an SSP license should just give you free rein to go and distribute and collect syringes anywhere you want in the county. I don't think that's responsible use of public or private land.
Councilor Leonard?
I think it is important to understand, though, that the location for these areas are very, very, there's not a lot of options for dealing with those that are right now, the ones who are most likely to contract HIV through this outbreak. They are most likely mobily challenged in some way, shape, or form, restricted to certain areas of the city. If, for example, if we have a SSP, if we, let's say we're just very, very anti having SSPs like in the core of the city, for example, and you can only exist in the outskirts of Bangor. If that happens, the traffic that they're going to get as a organization is going to be minimal, and it's actually going to acquire more SSPs in the area to actually get the traffic that they would otherwise not be getting. Centralizing the SSP to make it easier for all these populations to easily get to it and access those services is going to be not only more effective, but it's going to also require us to have fewer SSPs in the area. So I do hear the concerns about certain properties might be uncomfortable with that. The fact of the matter is, though, we have an HIV outbreak, okay? Yeah, it sucks. It's awful. And no one wants to have an SSP in their city. I don't want to have an SSP in the city, but we need an SSP. It's just, that's not an option to not support the effort, the people who defend us from outbreaks, preventable diseases, whether that's cholera, HIV, whatever it is. And so it's important to understand that if we want these SSPs to be effective, we have to consider that we have to give in some way as well. Because again, it's all about locality, it's all about mobility. If people can't access these SSPs, we're going to get more SSPs in the city. So it's incumbent on us to be smart about this as well.
Councilor Beck?
I would just say, the testimony itself reading through the concerns, if you just change the wording to say, instead of, our concerns are, if you said with careful consideration, or if done strategically, this testimony as written almost supports the bill.
Correct.
Just with a few word changes.
Okay.
So, and I know that wasn't the intent, I mean, it says right at the beginning, we oppose. What I'm hearing from everybody is that our objection is based on our bad experience with one SSP. And that's fair, but I hate to see us put our thumb on the scale for the rest of the state based on our experience with one bad SSP, because the bill itself is good. One of the things in the testimony we talked about is decisions need to be made with data. And in the bill, it says they have to collect that data and they have to submit it to the main Center for Disease Control. We worry about, being notified. That's the place where the bill can be fixed. It says that the state gets notified, but we're not notified. So that's an amendment I would definitely propose. But it does say that part of the agreement for them being able to do this is the proper disposal of hypodermic apparatuses. They have to clean up. They have to be part of it. But what's not in here is a grievance policy of if we have an SSP who's not playing by that rule, but if, again, this may be my lack of education about the rest of the bill outside of that, or the rest of the law around this, but it feels like right now there is no grievance policy where we can say, hey, we've noticed that they've operated in these places, but the cleanups aren't happening. They're not doing the things that they promised they would do. So it would be nice to have a grievance policy. That's part of a good partnership of you made promises, you're not working with us on it. Who can we go to? So I mean, if anything, we're going to testify on this because again, we're in an HIV outbreak, and it's well mentioned in here that I hate to see us take, players off the field. If we can just get them to work with us, but especially statewide. Again, we're having a bad experience with ours. I hate to tell the rest of the state or see the rest of the state not get access to this law because of our one bad experience. And if we can just help the legislature, see these few changes, what a difference it would make for us. I think it would help everybody in the state. But especially the data piece, because it's in here, it's in the bill, and we need that data to make good decisions. And I definitely want to see, I see more data getting collected because of this.
Right, and I think the emphasis in here was that the CDC does not have the data that helps them define where and how to best deliver SSPs across the state. That was, kind of one of our concerns is that from a public health practice, you want to roll out the practices and you want to meet people where they are. But that isn't what happens now. And that's kind of the struggle, but I agree with a lot of what you say, and I will share with you that the CDC testified that neither for nor against, but basically said not this bill is written. And that was how they testified earlier today.
Councilor
So
Leonard.
that was literally what I was just gonna say. If the council wants to go forward and have we are not for or against
Yep.
this bill and want to be completely
And lay out the-
informational,
Yep.
I'm lay out
Okay.
all the grievances that you have that's completely warranted, but
Okay,
I'm not comfortable being against this bill.
okay,
And that goes back to the input that everyone wants. I mean, that
Right.
grievance policy is a chance for us to say, this is not going well, and get a second pair of eyes on this.
All right,
all right.
any other LDs anyone want to talk
I was
about?
gonna say, I knew it was a lot of pages.
Manager updates.
Wow.
Now,
Well, we
any
took-
other LDs?
I had one,
Nice.
I don't know if, how much this actually would apply to us, but it did catch my eye. LD 290, 15% of any vehicle law fines.
Yes, comes back to the municipality. I
Yeah.
just got that today.
Yeah, so, that's,
Yeah.
any additional revenue is great in my book. But I don't know how much actually would apply, because we have our own police department and,
But what it's getting to is, so for example, when our police department writes moving violations, whether it's a speeding ticket or an accident or failure, whatever it may be, the city gets none of that money.
oh,
We get none of it. It all goes to the state of Maine. And the state of Maine will tell you that they use it to fund like, the OUI drug, OUI enforcement programs and things like that. So we get no money. On the flip side, people will say, I've seen communities in other states where their budget is so heavily reliant on vehicle fines, that there's some thought, true or not, that they will pound certain things to ensure they meet their budget. So it's kind of this, but I'll pull it for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna go through all the bills I have in here, and this is just to make a point of like what I said earlier regarding having a legislative committee. That there are a lot of good bills here that I read. There's also ones I don't like, but that's another story. So like, I'm just gonna bring up one example, LD 558, says this. To sum it up, it prohibits reporting medical debt on consumer credit reports. That's a very helpful bill for especially lower middle income residents here who, I mean, the largest form of bankruptcy in this country is medical debt. And so that will negatively affect people's credit scores, and this would help a lot of people in so many ways. And so like if we wanted to write testimony in favor of this, I'd be fine with it, but I bring this up as a point that again, there are a lot of bills that we're not talking about tonight that are really good, that we should be talking about, that might even have a lot to do with us right here in Bangor, but again, we just need to have that legislative committee formed.
Thanks. Anyone else? Manager updates.
So we did the BRAC. I just wanted to let folks know too that Bangor Housing Authority has requested a letter of support from us for their rental assistant demonstration conversion, which is a renovation of Birch Park, currently known as Birch Circle in Griffin Park. This is a federal initiative that allows them as a public housing authority to convert public housing into long-term Section 8 rental assistance contracts. And it will provide obviously stability and investment in our housing. It would receive necessary renovations such as thermal envelope improvements, vinyl siding, windows, doors, flooring, painting, and necessary HVAC updates and ADA conversion. So is anybody concerned about us improving housing? I was thinking not, but.
I think we're good.
All right. And I just wanted to reiterate, we're still in the early stages of our recently adopted public policy comment. I just want to take a moment to clarify a couple of things that I've heard that I think may be leading to some misinterpretation. The most noticeable change obviously is in the public comment period, that part at the beginning where people are being able to speak on items that are not on the agenda. If we do limit it to 15 minutes so that we can get through the agenda. And then if there are more individuals who like to speak, then we can accommodate at the end of the meeting, but that is the council chair's discretion. Last week, there were a couple of individuals who felt they were not afforded, but I did go back and watch it, and I shared that out with you that the interim chair did ask if there were others in attendance. As none approached, the general comment period was closed and wasn't reopened. Second, I saw in some comments online somewhere that there seems to be impression that the city council is somehow limiting the opportunities to speak on items appearing on the agenda. The city council still accepts public comment on particular council agenda items at the time the item is introduced in the city council. So while we're out here publicly, I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. Anything else?
Well, just in reference to that, would it be helpful for the public if we were to at least make sure we make some kind of statement saying, hey, if we're gonna do the additional, let them know ahead of time to say, okay, that's the end of 15 minutes. If you still want
And we
to,
typically do.
yeah,
So, if there are, because we typically are reading the room,
Yeah.
and if there are people continuing to come up, we're like, okay, we're gonna stop this now. And we'll
Okay.
come back and reopen, but that didn't happen last week because.
Well, they had the
I think,
opportunity and
they did, and they didn't,
come
and
up.
then, so therefore there was an assumption that
yeah,
there was no need to carry it forward.
right,
But
right,
we had been carrying it forward before then, so.
Councilor Trumbull.
One thing I think maybe we could add to that beginning
Mhm,
thing about public comment, I think we can condense it, I mean, it's
We
quite a
did.
bit to read.
we did.
But the thing I
We
think would be
tried.
helpful to tell the public is say, if you have comments on something on the agenda, maybe raise your hand when you get to that, because otherwise you get to the agenda and you ask for council comment, then you
Right.
go to vote.
Every-
Unless somebody comes up, you generally don't add anybody from the
Yeah.
public, so maybe
Well,
they could raise a hand if they want to speak on an item on the agenda when it comes out.
I know historically, I had always said,
Is there any member of the public who'd like to
well,
speak on
I
this?
don't say that any member of the public, but I used to say, are there any comments?
Right,
Yeah, I don't think the public takes it as a chance to come. I think as we mentioned at the beginning, and my
Okay.
perspective, I don't know. I think
okay.
a lot of times people feel like it just gets,
It's going
Goes
so
that-
fast, they don't have any
Right, yeah.
hands, yeah.
Usually, I think most of the people, if they're there for an item, they make it a point to
it might let you
share
know, yeah.
with us, yeah. Anyway. But good to hear, good to know. Any other items? Seeing none, we're adjourned till 7.